It's our Conversations with Great Minds Hour with Dr. Richard Wolff, economist, professor emeritus of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, visiting professor at the Graduate Program for International Affairs at the New School University of New York City, author of numerous books, including his latest Democracy at Work, A Cure for Capitalism. You can read all about it on his website at rdwolff, that's with two Fs, WOLFF.com. And Professor Wolff, first of all, thank you for staying with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
And you were kind of on a roll when we hit that break. Do you want to finish that thought? Just recap it very quickly, and then we can pick up some phone calls, or if there are, unless there are other things that you think need to be said before any further questions are asked.
Well, I think the basic thing that I want to stress is that in our economic system, as workers became more productive over the period from 1800 to 1970, their wages went up. And that, another way of saying that is workers participated in their growing productivity. They worked hard, they learned more techniques, they had more machines to work with, but their wages went up with their productivity. Since the 1970s, my apologies for the noise. Right. Since the 1970s, workers have continued to become more productive, but their wages didn't go up anymore. All their growing productivity didn't get them leisure. They're working harder now than ever before. According to the OECD, a major institution keeping statistical records around the world, Americans do more hours of paid labor per year than the working people in any other country on this planet. So rising productivity of our workers has not brought them the leisure that was promised. If anything, it has brought them more and more labor, and over the last 5 years, harder and harder economic times. For me, that's a sign of an exhausted economic system that we need to question and debate in a way we have not done for 50 years, and it's long overdue so that we can face up to our problems, which is always the first step in overcoming them.
And what would be your remedy for this?
Well, that's what I write up in the book, Democracy at Work. I really mean it. I think working people can and should be in the position to make collectively the decisions of what is done in our productive enterprises, our stores, our offices, our factories. The reality is that we all as a people have to live with the results of the economic decisions that are made. And yet we allow them to be made in the interests of the major shareholders, who are very few, and in the interests of the boards of directors they select, which as a percentage of the population is tiny, less than 0.1%. And I think that's the root of our problem. And I think the beginning of a solution now is to change the way we organize our enterprises, to systematically explore the cooperative way of building business as a surer road to make sure that the economic decisions that we take are made by the mass of people democratically, because if they're not, they will continue to favor only a tiny minority at the expense of all of the rest of us, and it is now becoming a very serious threat to what we used to call the American way of life.
Yeah, brilliantly said. Well, let's pick up some phone calls and get some of our viewers and listeners in here. Ed, watching us on Free Speech TV in Atlanta, Georgia. You're on the air with Dr. Wolff.
Hi, Dr. Wolff. I love your work, and I appreciate everything you have to say. My question is, like, as someone interested in activism or whatever, and the kind of language that we use, and it seems like America has an allergy to the word socialism. And I notice you use the word democracy, but that's used all the time. Moving forward, I consider myself a democratic socialist, but I don't know if that language is harmful or we should just use it more and more and try to explain it better and better and try to change the debate.
Okay, let's get Dr. Wolff in on this, Ed. Thank you very much for the call. Dr. Wolff?
I think it's a very important question. And I think the way to begin to deal with it is to recognize two fundamental facts. First, to admit and to not shy away from the fact that in the name of socialism and communism over the 20th century, some pretty awful things were done. And there has to be a reckoning about that. We have to either decide not to use the terms anymore as a kind of nod to the things that were done that were awful. Or, as you put it, we have to change the language so that these words are given the kind of meaning we want them to have and not the meaning that is attached to them because of the disasters that some who use that word achieved, let's put it that way. The second issue is that for 70 years now, almost 60 years for sure, it has been a taboo here in the United States. It has been impossible for Americans to have an honest, open debate about the capitalist system and its alternatives like socialism. Every time this issue came up over the last 50 years, anyone who's expressed criticism of capitalism or an interest in socialism was dealt with as either ignorant or a traitor or a spy or something awful. And so, of course, it shut down the conversation. And if you don't debate a system that you live with, then you tend to give that system a free pass, and it can indulge its worst tendencies. We're living with the results now of a capitalism that escaped the kind of honest debate and honest criticism that it ought to have. We didn't do ourselves any service by refusing to debate and discuss socialism. So my own hope is that we overcome that, we grow up, we learn the ability to reject those kinds of socialism we don't want without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, with being able to talk about socialism as having things for us to learn from, just like the capitalism we criticize has things for us to learn from, and develop that debate, making up for all the lost time of the last 50 years when we couldn't have it.
Okay. Mark in Seattle, listening on Talk 1090 in Seattle. You are on the air with Dr. Richard Wolff.
Hi, Tom. It's Mark Taylor Canfield. This is a great show. I really appreciate what you guys are doing to expose this information because it's really not something that is discussed in politics or the media. And so I have a quick comment and then a question. First of all, there is another issue here, which is that I think a lot of folks are realizing that the system just isn't working for them. And you witness the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and Sandy. And by the way, a shout out to the Occupy Wall Street folks who are volunteering to help everyone. So, hey, to everybody at Occupy Sandy, keep up the good work. But I wrote an article for the Seattle Times asking the voters in the U.S. to join with the folks in Europe and around the rest of the world that are trying to fight these worldwide austerity measures because the cuts to education, healthcare, social services, and bailing out the banksters, multinationals, is all happening all over the world.
So your question for Dr. Wolff, Mark?
My question is don't you think also that in order, and it seems like you're moving towards this point anyway, don't you think that in order to address the corruption in the banking system and in the economic system that we also are going to need to change our electoral system? And isn't the real question, well, is the system working for the majority of the people?
Yeah. Dr. Wolff?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That is the fundamental question, and I think that the last 5 years do give us an unambiguous answer that whatever this system is achieving, providing a better life for the mass of the American people is not among the outputs of the last 5 years. And hence, I believe that millions of Americans are asking these questions and coming to new conclusions. I think Occupy Wall Street is a sign of that. I think the popularity of Thom Hartmann is a sign of that. And there are dozens of other signs of this kind of awakening, if you like it, or rediscovery. Let me add a word about Sandy. I live in New York City. I live in an apartment in which for a week we had no power, no heat, no hot water, and no telephone service. I was astonished that after 10 years of Homeland Security designed to help us as a nation cope with emergencies and disasters, the federal government, the state government, and the city government here were unable to come in and help people in anything like the way they could have and they should have. We've had the result of $60 billion worth of losses from this storm. For a tiny fraction of that, we could have had the preparedness, the people, and the resources to help. We still have tens of thousands of people without power and heat. The temperatures are low. It is in its own way, as you suggested, an indictment of a system that in more and more areas cannot work in the way we are capable of and that we need as a nation.
Yeah. We have just a minute before the break. Again, what What's the alternative?
Well, again, for me, the basic answer is you cannot allow the economic resources of the nation, the wealth, the enterprises, to be under the control of tiny groups of people. We really can't be surprised.
How do we take it from them?
That the decisions are made by them for them. The alternative is the collective democratic organization of enterprises. I think that's the fundamental. And so that these democratically run enterprises can work together with democratically run cities and states to reorganize the economy and make it work for everyone by removing the decision-making apparatus we have now, which isn't democratic and therefore has to be questioned, especially when it produces such poor results.
Yeah, brilliant. Dr. Richard Wolff is with us in our Conversations with Great Minds Hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We will be back in just a moment with more of Dr. Wolff. Stick with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And you can find Dr. Wolff's new book, Democracy at Work, A Cure for Capitalism, pretty much everywhere, but also at his website, rdwolff with 2fs.com. And welcome back. Let's pick up some calls from our Free Speech TV viewers here as well. Ed, you're still with us, Dr. Wolff?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Ed, watching us on Dish Network in Klamath Falls, Oregon. You're on the air with Dr. Wolff.
Dr. Wolff, I happen to think that capitalism is coming to an end of a cyclical period where it's going to collapse. It looks like the Americans believe in printing money, possibly risking hyperinflation, and the Europeans believe in restricting credit, risking a deflationary spiral. Which way is it going to fall?
Well, that's in many ways, in the circle of economists that I spend time with, a very big question. Both systems are pumping money into the economy. Both systems are flailing around, unable to overcome their unemployment problems. That's true here in this country as well as in Europe. And, when you have a volatile mix of money pouring in and yet economic activity very lackluster, unemployment stubbornly remaining, it could go either way. You have the ingredients for the kinds of failure of businesses that will collapse prices, and you also have the kind of overload of financial means, money, that could drive prices up. And the anxious people in charge of this out-of-control economy scratch their heads and have conferences trying to figure out the answer to your question. Which way is it going to go? And they're also frightened because when they take a step to avoid going in one direction, they're threatened with it veering out of control. But again, without wanting to beat a horse that's already dead, let me say that these are more signs that a system isn't able to reproduce itself in an acceptable way for most of the people in a society. We shouldn't be hanging on the disaster of deflation or the disaster of inflation, and it's a sign of where we are that those are the twin horrors that bedevil all the decision makers who are responsible for getting us out of this mess.
Well, speaking of those decision makers, to what extent do you lay some blame at the feet of the Citizens United decision and all those that preceded it, Buckley versus Vallejo, First National Bank versus Bilotti, all the way back to Santa Clara County? To what extent do you think that pollution of our politics with money has something to do with this? We have a minute till the break, sir.
It's absolutely crucial. I couldn't overstate it in a million years. What we did by all those decisions, culminating in Citizens United, was simply this. We said to the richest entities in our society, the biggest corporations and the richest individuals, here, you can make sure that you can solidify your control of the economic wealth in this country by taking over the political system as well. by making the politicians and the parties depend on you, you can frustrate what would otherwise be the democratic use of power by the mass of people to undo the inequality in the economic sphere. It was precisely to prevent that the corporate rich and the very wealthy wanted the power to shape and control politics. So we are suffering from that as a very significant way. We lost the political power to exercise the mass desire not to have the kind of grotesque inequality our economy now shows us.
And what's so bizarre is we never voted for it. It was 9 people in the kings and queens in black robes just down the street from me here. It's an amazing thing. Dr. Richard Wolff is with us, and our Conversations with Great Minds Hour will be back in just a moment with more with Dr. Wolff. Indeed. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Conversations with Great Minds Hour with Dr. Richard Wolff. Check out his website, rdwolff, WOLFF.com. And Paul in South Lyon, Michigan, watching us on Free Speech TV on Dish Network. You're on the air with Dr. Wolff.
Yeah, how you doing, Dr. Wolff? I'm a big admirer of your economic thinking. My question is, wouldn't a simpler more, but maybe less effective, but a simpler solution to our problems be to redistribute the wealth from the billionaires and the 100 millionaires who call themselves job creators, but they're really job killers? Wouldn't a simpler solution be to redistribute the wealth back to working people of this country?
Do we need a jubilee, sir?
Well, I was just about to say that, Tom. You and I seem to be thinking alike today. In ancient times, back in the era of the Greeks and the Romans, and in the Christian tradition too, there is this notion of jubilee that you have periodically to deal with the inequality that creeps into your community and threatens to disrupt it and set people against each other, stoking the fires of envy and resentment, that you have to deal with that by periodically redistributing the wealth, taking it away from those who have gathered too much and passing it out to those who didn't get so much, so that we go back to the roughly equal status that can allow us to be a community without such differences. And we ought to listen to that long tradition that's very ancient, because it might have a lesson for us along the lines you say. But I would have this caution or disagreement perhaps with you. It isn't enough to redistribute the wealth, because if that's all you do, then you leave in place the same mechanisms. You're going to have that split between successful and unsuccessful, rich and poor, simply recur within the next few years. We want something which will give everybody an equal starting point, a level playing field, and then will work in such a way that we don't ever get the problem of having to take stuff away from some people to help other people, because we guarantee the kinds of economic system that gives some people more and some people less, but nothing like the grotesque situation today, for example, where 10% of our wealthiest people own 75% of the wealth of this society and things like that. So you need to both change the system and get us back to start at an equal starting point so everybody has an equal chance in order to solve the kinds of problems we have.
Jim in Madera, California, listening to Sirius XM. You're on the air with Dr. Wolff.
Well, actually, I kind of have a point to make. I owned a window and door company for 30 years, and, I always grossed between $1 and $2 million. And so I paid a lot of taxes, but it's been my experience when the taxes were a little bit higher. Well, when money was cheap or taxes were cheap, I would pull the money out of the business. But when I was forced to pay a little bit higher taxes, I left money in the business so I wouldn't have to pay the taxes. So I argue that having a little bit higher taxes will encourage growth, especially on, single entrepreneurs that are just, right in the area I was in.
Yeah, I've had that same experience, Jim.
Yes.
Dr. Wolff?
Let me comment on it in terms of history. Your question is very well taken. the rates of taxation on both businesses in America and on the wealthiest people were much, much higher in the 1960s and 70s than they are today, particularly in the 1960s. And if you compare the economic growth rate of the 1960s to today, we were much more of a growing economy at that time. The conservatives constantly misunderstand by imagining that lower taxes on business and the rich are some sort of guarantee of low economic growth. That's not the history of the United States. The best growth periods after World War II for the American economy occurred together with high taxes on corporations and the rich, and the government using that tax money to create growth supports, high demand, the very things that businesses need to have the confidence to grow.
Yeah. Dr. Wolff, I still have a dozen people here on the board who want to talk to you. In other words, we're slammed, but we only have 2 minutes until the end of the hour and the end of the show today. I'd like to toss those to you as an opportunity to recap and summarize and put forward suggestions. What individuals can do moving forward? What can we do?
Well, the single most important thing that I stress is that stop thinking as though what the Republicans and the Democrats say in Congress, what the newspapers reprint, and what the professors who want to please those folks keep saying, stop thinking within those limits. If ever the term thinking outside the box had any meaning, it means think outside the box of conventional wisdom. We do not have an economic system, capitalism, that is delivering the goods. It did that once for most Americans. It doesn't do it anymore. And we have to be courageous enough as a people to face that, to look at the alternatives that people like me and many others are putting forward, to think in terms of changing. Let me conclude with an example. The most effective organized help that is being provided to the people of the New York area to recover from Sandy is being done by Occupy Wall Street volunteers. They have been heroes and heroines. They have taken the spirit of their critique of the 1% versus 99% society and shown that committed people in large numbers can democratically help solve the problems of this society in an immediate and obvious way. That's the lesson I think Americans ought to focus on, and if they do, I'm confident that they will come up with the organizations and the programs to take the society in a new and better direction.
Absolutely brilliant. Dr. Richard Wolff, thank you so much for being with us, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Tom, for maintaining this kind of programming, which is more important now in our history than ever before.
Well, thank you. We're going to keep doing it as long as we can. Dr. Richard Wolff, check out his website, rdwolff.com.